"You're such a saint, Sarah," my mom gushed, her voice practically oozing pride, eyes shining with that particular blend of adoration and relief she reserved for my sister. "We don't know what we'd do without you." I just sat there, silent, my fork hovering over my plate, feeling the weight of her words settle on my shoulders like an old familiar coat. Sarah, sitting across from me, offered up that perfect, smug grin, the one she'd worn since childhood, the one that said she knew the world would always bend in her direction. She didn't even bother to look at me. She didn't need to. She could sense I wouldn't protest, that I wouldn't ruin the family story. Sometimes I wondered if she knew, deep down, that I couldn't. My name's Julia Mitchell. I'm 27, and I teach 3rd grade at the local elementary school. I've always thought of myself as unremarkable, dependable, yes, but not the kind of person people notice in a crowd. In my family, that's pretty much my entire identity. The reliable daughter, the one who quietly shoulders the invisible weight. My older sister Sarah, she's the golden child. Radiant, charming, always at the center of attention, her laughter lighting up rooms while I lingered in doorways. If Sarah walked into a room, everyone looked up. If I did, it was as though nothing had happened at all. For years, I've been quietly picking up the pieces in this family, even as everyone looked past me. I've sent money home month after month, helping with my dad's treatments, covering surprise medical bills, going without new shoes or dinners out so Mom could get her prescriptions. I scraped by, living on the edge, always telling myself it was temporary, that eventually someone would notice. Meanwhile, Sarah basked in the glow of gratitude, collecting praise like it was her birthright. It was always Sarah who got the thank you cards, the extra slice of pie, the whispered words about how lucky we were to have her. It wore me down. There's only so much you can give before something inside you starts to splinter. I used to think love meant sacrifice, that the only way to belong was to keep giving, no matter how empty you felt. But recently I reached my limit. The exhaustion, the resentment, the quiet ache of being invisible, it all caught up with me. I decided, almost without realizing it, that I was done. No more late-night budget spreadsheets. No more skipped meals so my family could pay the utilities. No more stepping aside while Sarah wore the hero's crown. I remember the moment I stopped sending money as clearly as if it happened yesterday. There was no big fight, no slammed doors or accusations. I was just sitting in my cramped apartment, the kind where you can hear your neighbor sneeze, staring at my bank account after I paid rent. The numbers glared back at me, a silent accusation. Something inside me snapped, quietly but finally. I realized I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being while Sarah played the savior. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't write an email or call my parents. I just stopped. For a while, nothing happened. Weeks drifted by, silent and uneventful, and I wondered if anyone would notice the absence of my quiet contributions. I half hoped they'd realize the truth, that Sarah wasn't the one paying the bills, that it had always been me. Maybe, I thought, they'd finally see me, but the silence dragged on, heavy and unbroken, until the calls started. First it was Mom, her voice a little sharper than usual, asking if I knew anything about some insurance payment that hadn't gone through. Then Dad mentioned overdue notices in passing, his tone casual, but his words edged with worry. Through it all, Sarah stayed silent. She didn't text, didn't call, didn't ask me to cover for her. I imagined her, perfectly composed, hoping the truth would stay hidden, or that someone else would fix things before she was exposed. There was a strange comfort in the absurdity of it all. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Everything came to a head one Sunday, the kind of day that always feels heavy with expectation. Mom called, her voice tight, worry bleeding through every syllable. "Julia, your dad's insurance payment is overdue again. Did something happen to Sarah's account? She says she's been handling everything, but things keep slipping through the cracks." For the first time, I heard something new in her voice, a fissure of doubt, a tremor that suggested the world she believed in might not be as solid as she thought. My chest tightened. I wanted to shout, to finally say, "It's not Sarah. It's been me all along. I've been saving you when you thought it was her." But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, held back by years of habit and fear of what would happen if I broke the family illusion. So I just said, "Maybe you should ask Sarah directly." It was a small act of rebellion, a refusal to clean up the mess this time. I let the silence linger, let the truth hang between us, waiting for someone else to pick it up. But guilt is a stubborn thing. Every time my parents called, sounding confused or worried, I felt it gnaw at me, an ache in my stomach, a voice in my head whispering that I was letting them down. Even though, if I was honest, this wasn't my fault. I'd done more than enough. I'd spent years putting their needs above my own, and all I had to show for it was exhaustion and invisibility. The weeks dragged on, each phone call more frantic than the last. Mom's tone grew sharper, her anxiety bubbling over. Sarah says she's trying to work it out, but the hospital keeps sending these notices. "Your father can't miss his treatments, Julia," she snapped one night, her words like barbs. Meanwhile, Sarah's Instagram was a parade of rooftop cocktails, weekend getaways, and expensive skincare routines. She posted photos of herself laughing with friends, the city twinkling behind her, while our parents struggled to keep the lights on. It was like she lived in a different universe, untouched by the consequences of her actions. Eventually, Mom insisted we all get together for dinner, framing it as a chance to talk things through. I knew what that meant. It would be another performance. Sarah would offer her excuses, Mom would defend her, Dad would stay silent, and I would fade into the background. But this time, something shifted. As we sat around the table, Dad, usually silent and reserved, looked directly at Sarah. His voice was calm but unyielding. "You've been handling this for months, Sarah. What's going on? Why can't you keep up with the payments?" For the first time, Sarah looked uncertain. The color drained from her face, and the practiced smile slipped. She stammered about unexpected expenses and temporary setbacks, but her words rang hollow. She hadn't prepared for this, hadn't expected to be questioned. Mom jumped in, her voice sharp and protective, the way it always was when Sarah was under fire. "She's doing her best, Robert. Why don't you lay off her?" "And Julia," she said, turning to me with eyes full of pointed disappointment, "maybe it's time you step up and help for once. You don't do anything for us as it is." Her words hit like a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. I felt my face go hot, my hands trembling in my lap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The injustice of it washed over me. Years of sacrifices, ignored, erased with a single accusation. I glanced at Sarah, who wouldn't meet my gaze, and then at Mom, whose anger was focused squarely on me. Dad sat there, silent, unwilling or unable to intervene. That's when the reality hit me with brutal clarity. They really believed it. In their eyes, Sarah had always been the hero, the savior. And I was the selfish one. The daughter who gave nothing and expected everything. Everything I'd done, all the money, the worry, the sleepless nights, meant nothing compared to the myth of Sarah. My voice shook, but I forced myself to speak. "That's not true, Mom. I've been helping. I'm the one who's been paying those bills for years." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. It was as if the entire house was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. For a moment, I thought maybe, finally, someone would believe me. Maybe the truth would matter. But Mom shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Julia, don't be ridiculous. Sarah is the one paying for everything. She's been working so hard to keep us afloat. You've done nothing to help us, and now you're trying to take credit for her sacrifices." Her words stung more than I expected. I looked at Sarah, hoping for a flicker of recognition or guilt, but she just stared at the table. Dad avoided my eyes. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I tried, my family would never see me. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the story they'd always told themselves. The one where Sarah was the saint, and I was just there. I sat back in my chair, feeling hollow. I wondered how many times people like me, quiet, dependable, unseen, had their stories rewritten by the people they loved. How many sacrifices went unnoticed, how many truths were ignored because they didn't fit the narrative. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn a place in my own family, and how little it had mattered in the end. That night, as I walked home alone, the city lights blurring in the rain, I realized something had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired of carrying burdens that weren't acknowledged, tired of chasing approval that would never come. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who refused to see it. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. I gripped the edge of the table, pressing my fingertips into the wood until they ached just to keep myself steady. Across from me, Sarah sat ramrod straight, her posture stiff as if she'd turned to stone. Her face was a mask, her eyes wide with something like shock, but her mouth set in a line that hinted at guilt. Not once did she open her mouth to defend herself, not even a weak protest. I hadn't planned to say anything. I'd promised myself I wouldn't. But my words tumbled out before I could stop them, spilling into the silence like water breaking through a dam. That's not true, Mom. It's never been true. For 3 years, I've been the one sending money to cover those bills, every month. Sarah hasn't paid for a single thing. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going, even as the weight of the room pressed in on me. And you know what? I stopped because I got tired of being invisible while she took all the credit. I just wanted to help, but I couldn't keep pretending it didn't matter. Sarah's head snapped up as if stung, her eyes burning into me. Her mouth twisted in a way that would have looked convincing to anyone else, but I saw the way her lower lip quivered. "What is wrong with you, Julia?" She shot back, her voice trembling just enough to sound wounded. "Why are you making up these lies? This is insane. I'm the one who's been helping Mom and Dad, and now you're trying to make me look bad." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "Are you seriously going to sit there and pretend I'm lying, Sarah? I have bank statements, receipts, 3 whole years' worth. Do you want me to show everyone right now?" My hands shook, but I welcomed the anger. It was easier to hold on to than the hurt. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Receipts? What receipts, Julia? You're just bitter because Mom and Dad actually appreciate what I do for them. You've been sitting on the sidelines while I've been holding this family together, and now you want to swoop in and rewrite history." She spat the last words as if they tasted sour. "Rewrite history?" I repeated, my voice rising in spite of myself. "You've been stealing credit for everything I've done, Sarah. I'm the one who's been sending money month after month while you spend your paychecks on spa days and vacations. You haven't given up anything for this family except your free time, and even then, it was always on your terms." She crossed her arms, glancing at Mom as if expecting backup. "See, Mom? This is what I'm talking about. Julia always plays the victim. She's just trying to tear me down because she can't stand that I'm actually helping you." Her voice dripped with manufactured hurt, the kind she'd perfected over years of getting her way. But I saw the tiny crack in her armor, a tremor where her confidence should have been. Suddenly, Sarah's voice cut through the thick silence, sharp, accusing. "If you were really helping, Julia, why didn't you say a word for 3 years? And now, out of nowhere, you bring this up? Let me guess. You wouldn't have said anything if it wasn't about credit. Admit it. You're just mad because they think I'm the one helping. Nothing else makes sense." She stared at me, her gaze hard, but her hands fidgeted in her lap. Mom folded her arms, echoing Sarah's stance, her lips pursed in a way that made my heart sink. "Sarah's right, Julia. Why wouldn't you tell us sooner if you were helping all this time? You expect us to believe this now after all these years? It just feels strange, Julia. It really does." She looked at me as if I were a stranger, someone whose motives she couldn't quite trust. My cheeks burned. I could feel the frustration bubbling up like lava, threatening to spill over. "I didn't do it for the credit," I said, my voice shaking. "I wanted to help you. I didn't think I needed to make a big deal out of it. I thought it was enough to know I was doing the right thing. And yeah, maybe I should have spoken up sooner. Maybe I made a mistake keeping quiet. But how is it okay for Sarah to take credit for something she didn't do? How is that fair?" Sarah rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of uncertainty there, a tiny crack in her polished performance. "Oh, please, Julia, you're acting like I forced you into silence. If this is even true, which I doubt, why wait until now to throw it in everyone's faces? Because you're bitter, that's why. This isn't about helping. It's about making me look bad." She leaned back, her words laced with venom. But I noticed the way her hands clenched into fists. Dad shook his head, his voice quiet but searching. "Julia, I just don't understand why you'd keep quiet all this time if it's true. I don't get it." His confusion hurt more than his words, and I wished he could see the years I'd spent putting their needs above my pride. Their doubt hit me like a punch, each word landing heavier than the last. Sarah's smug expression only deepened the ache inside me, twisting the knife. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. I turned to face her, refusing to look away. I didn't say anything because I was happy to help Mom and Dad. I didn't need recognition. I did it for them, not for anyone's approval. But when I saw you taking credit for my sacrifices, I felt betrayed. So I waited, just to see how long you'd keep it up. I kept hoping you'd come clean, that you'd just admit the truth on your own. My voice cracked again, and I swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears come. Sarah's face flushed red, but she dug in, her stubbornness flaring up. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising to cover her own uncertainty. "So you let me take the credit? Just sat there for years and now you're trying to pin this on me? You could have stopped at any time, Julia, but you waited until now. How convenient. When you think you can humiliate me." "I waited," I said, cutting her off, "because I wanted to see if you'd ever own up to it, if you'd ever have the decency to tell the truth. But you didn't, Sarah. You just let everyone believe your story while I worked myself to the bone, sacrificing time, energy, and money. I wanted to believe you'd do the right thing someday, but you never did. Every time Mom or Dad praised you, I hoped you'd say something, but you just smiled and let it happen." I turned to my parents, searching their faces for even a flicker of understanding. But all I saw was doubt and confusion, a mess of emotions that broke my heart. I didn't want this fight. I never wanted to stand in the middle of my family and force this ugly truth into the open. But I couldn't let Sarah keep rewriting our story, twisting my silence into her own triumph. I straightened in my seat, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside. My voice was steady, even though my hands still trembled. "I have all the receipts, Mom. Every bank statement. Every payment for 3 years. I can pull them up in 5 minutes if you want. I can show you every single transaction. But that's not the point." I turned to Sarah, meeting her eyes without flinching. "What I want is for you to admit what you've been doing. Just be honest for once. Tell the truth, not just for me, but for Mom and Dad. They deserve to know who's really been there for them." Sarah crossed her arms tighter. Her jaw clenched, her face hardening into that same stubborn mask I'd seen so many times before. For a moment, I thought I saw something else flicker in her eyes, fear, or maybe regret. But it was gone in a second, replaced by cold defiance. The silence that followed felt endless, as if everyone were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. In that moment, I realized the truth was standing in the open, raw, and undeniable, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. No matter what Sarah said next, no matter whether my parents believed me right away or not, I had finally spoken, and I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied, her voice clipped and carefully measured, like she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. She tried to play it off, tried to sound cool and detached, but I didn't miss the tremor in her words, that tiny fissure that betrayed her fear. "I've been the one handling everything. If you have any proof, then show it, Julia. Otherwise, stop spinning these stories just to make me look bad." The audacity of her denial sent a fresh wave of heat through me. It was like she was trying to gaslight me in front of everyone, rewrite reality so she could stay the golden child. But instead of lashing out, I fought to keep my composure. "Why should I have to show you anything, Sarah? You already know what you did. If you had a shred of integrity left, you'd own up to it instead of digging yourself even deeper into this mess." My dad leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair, a sickly pallor settling over his face. My mom sat frozen, her eyes darting between us, uncertainty etched into every line of her face. It was like I could see her heart breaking, torn between defending her eldest daughter and facing the possibility that she'd been fooled for years. And Sarah just sat there, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles twitching, refusing to let herself show any weakness. The tension in the room was suffocating. I felt like I was about to shatter. I shoved my chair back, the scrape echoing through the silence, and forced myself to my feet. My hands shook, but I steadied them on the back of the chair before letting go. "I'm done, Sarah," I said, willing my voice not to waver. "If you're that determined to keep lying, there's nothing left for me to say. I'm not going to keep wasting my time and energy trying to drag the truth out of you when you already know you're wrong." I let my gaze linger on her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of remorse, but all I saw was stubbornness. If there's even a shred of decency left in you, you'll tell Mom and Dad the truth. Until then, don't call me. Don't text. I'm finished." She scoffed, rolling her eyes and folding her arms across her chest, a wall I'd seen her put up 1,000 times before. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Julia. This whole thing is just ridiculous." Her words were meant to sting, to belittle me, but I refused to let her see how much it hurt. I grabbed my coat, refusing to look back, and walked out the door, leaving their expectations and their carefully constructed illusions behind. For the first time in my life, I chose myself over the version of me they wanted. The truth was, I could have ended the argument right then and there. I had the receipts, literal ones, on my phone. I could have pulled up the bank statements, the payment records, the texts where Sarah had promised to pay me back and then never did. I could have laid it all out for them, forced them to see what was right in front of their eyes. But I didn't want a technical victory. I wanted her to take responsibility, to finally admit to everyone what I'd known all along, that she'd been lying, taking advantage, hiding behind her perfect image while I cleaned up her messes. In the weeks and months that followed, the silence in our family settled in like a heavy fog. The easy conversations with my parents dried up, replaced by stilted exchanges about the weather or what groceries we needed. Every phone call felt like walking through a minefield, both of them tiptoeing around the subject, afraid to say her name or ask about the real reason behind my absence. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the disappointment, the way they clung to the hope that maybe this was just some misunderstanding that would blow over. But I knew better. I'd shattered the illusion Sarah had built, and now we were all living in the ruins. Sarah, for her part, vanished from my life entirely. I blocked her number, ignored her attempts to reach out, and skipped family gatherings if I knew she'd be there. Even on Mom's birthday, I stayed home, refusing to sit at the table and pretend everything was okay. I couldn't keep pretending for their sake, not when every smile felt like a lie. I'd spent too many years biting my tongue, letting her take credit for things I'd done, letting her spin her stories while I absorbed the fallout. I was done sacrificing my peace for her comfort. But nothing stays hidden forever. It didn't take long for the cracks in Sarah's perfect facade to start showing. I heard through mutual friends that she was struggling. Missed car payments, bills piling up. Her once glamorous Instagram feed suddenly filled with vague complaints about unexpected expenses and tight budgets. She'd started making the payments herself, scraping by to keep up appearances. But it was obvious to anyone paying attention that something had changed. The world she'd built on borrowed money and borrowed trust was starting to crumble, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I thought I'd feel triumphant watching her squirm, but mostly what I felt was hollow. I remembered every late night I'd spent worrying about covering her debts, every time I'd made excuses for her, every birthday or holiday where I'd put her needs above my own. Now, seeing her stumble for the first time, I felt a strange blend of satisfaction and grief. This wasn't what I wanted, for her or for me, but it was what she'd earned. Actions have consequences, and for once she couldn't talk her way out of them. Then, one gray Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I peered through the peephole and barely recognized the woman standing on my porch. Sarah looked nothing like the confident, put-together sister I remembered. Her hair was scraped back in a messy bun, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, shoulders hunched like she was bracing herself against the world. For a moment, I just stared, torn between slamming the door and letting her in. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, shaky and uncertain. There was something raw in her face I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or regret. Against all my better judgment, I moved aside and let her in. She sank onto the couch like she was carrying 1,000 pounds, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm in trouble, Julia," she finally managed, her words tumbling out as if saying them made them more real. "I can't keep up anymore. I don't know what to do." There was no bravado left, no practiced composure, just desperation. I stood by the door, arms folded tight across my chest, every muscle tense. I'd waited for this moment, pictured it so many times. But now that it was here, I found I felt nothing but a cold, tired resolve. "That's not my problem, Sarah," I told her, my voice low and even. I saw her flinch at my words, her eyes filling with sudden panic, but I didn't back down. "You made this bed. Now you get to lie in it." She stared at me, wide-eyed, as if she couldn't believe I was really refusing her. "Julia, please. I know I messed up, but..." I cut her off, sharper than I meant to, the words pouring out before I could stop them. "Messed up? You didn't just mess up, Sarah, you lied. You lied to Mom, to Dad, to me. You let me take the fall while you played the hero. And now you want me to bail you out again? No. I'm done being your safety net." Her voice was barely more than a whisper as she pleaded. "Please, Julia. I just need a little help. Things are really bad, and I don't have anyone else. I know I haven't been fair to you, but you're my sister." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the person behind the mask for the first time. All the anger, the resentment, the sadness I'd buried for years came surging back, but underneath it all was something like pity. Even now, I wanted to forgive her, to help her pick up the pieces, but I knew that if I did, nothing would change. She'd take my help, patch up her image, and go right back to pretending nothing was wrong. This was her moment to face the truth, to finally own up to everything she'd done. For a long moment, I just stood there, torn between the past and the future, between the sister I once loved and the woman she'd become. I realized that choosing myself didn't mean shutting her out forever, but it did mean refusing to be her scapegoat any longer. If she wanted forgiveness, if she wanted a relationship, it would have to start with the truth. And this time, I wouldn't settle for anything less. "Help?" My voice came out colder than I expected, and I watched Sarah flinch. "You want me to help you, after everything you've done? After all the years you let me carry this alone?" She nodded quickly, so desperate she almost looked like a child again. Her eyes red and swollen, her hands clutching each other so tightly her knuckles were white. "I know I screwed up, okay? But I'm trying, Julia. I'm really trying to make things right." Her voice broke on the last word, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. I let out a bitter laugh, sharp as broken glass. "Make things right? Sarah, you've spent years lying to my face, lying to everyone. And now you want my help?" My voice rose, trembling with anger I could barely contain. "You want to make things right? Then start by telling Mom and Dad the truth. Until you do that, I have nothing for you. Nothing." She went silent. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of what wasn't being said. I could see the panic flicker in her eyes, her mind scrambling for any excuse that might buy her more time. But this time, I wasn't going to let her find it. She stared down at her lap, twisting her hands, and for a moment I wondered if she would ever have the courage to look up again. Then, as if steeling herself, she sat straighter. Her voice, when it came, was sharper, almost defensive. "Look, Julia, I've been making the payments, okay? So technically, I'm not lying anymore. I'm handling it now, just like everyone thinks I have." My anger flared, hot and immediate. "Technically?" I spat the word like it tasted foul. "Do you even hear yourself, Sarah? You're not lying anymore? You let Mom and Dad believe you were the one saving them, while I worked extra shifts and skipped meals to make those payments. You got to be the hero while I was just the disappointment. And now you think doing the bare minimum erases years of lies?" Her jaw clenched. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Julia. I didn't mean for it to get this far." Her voice was small, almost pleading, but I was done listening to apologies that didn't mean anything. "That's the problem, Sarah." My words were knives, sharper than I meant, but I didn't care anymore. "You never mean for anything. You just let things happen, as long as you get to keep your perfect reputation. You weren't doing this for Mom and Dad. You were doing it for yourself, so they'd love you more. So you wouldn't have to admit you needed help." My hands shook, but I hid them in my lap, refusing to let her see how much it hurt. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes wet but determined. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to sound steady. "Okay, fine. I'll tell Mom and Dad the truth. I'll admit everything. But I need your help first, Julia. Please. Just this once." I stared at her, disbelieving. I could hardly process her nerve, her audacity. "You're kidding, right? You want me to help you clean up your mess, and then maybe you'll think about telling them the truth? How convenient." She shook her head, desperate. "No, I swear. I'll do it. I'll tell them everything, I promise. But I'm drowning here, Julia. I just need a little help to get through this, and then I'll come clean. I swear it." I let out another bitter laugh, crossing my arms. "So let me get this straight. You're going to keep lying unless I bail you out, and I'm supposed to believe you'll actually follow through this time? Why should I trust you now, after all the chances I already gave you?" She opened her mouth, searching for words, but I cut her off before she could begin. "No, Sarah, I'm done. If you want to fix this, you don't need me. You need to tell the truth finally for once in your life. That's it. That's the only way out." Sarah took a shaky breath, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of something real in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or understanding. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, more resolved than before. "Fine, I'll do it. I'll tell the whole family the truth, at the reunion next Saturday, in front of everyone." She looked at me, her eyes pleading for something I couldn't give. "Will that be enough, Julia? Will that make it right?" I let the question hang in the air, considering. "You're going to confess everything?" I asked slowly, watching her for any sign of hesitation. "Yes," she nodded, voice trembling but determined. "I'll tell them the whole truth. I'll tell them I lied, that it was you all along. I'll own up to everything." A heavy silence settled between us, thick with all the things we'd never said. I nodded, finally. "All right, if you actually stand up in front of everyone and admit what you've done, really admit it, then I'll give you the money on Sunday. But not before, and not if you back out." Sarah hesitated, the weight of my ultimatum settling on her. Then she nodded again, relief and fear flickering across her face. I didn't smile or soften. I kept my expression blank, hiding the storm inside me. The days leading up to the reunion were tense. Sarah barely spoke to me, her guilt and anxiety hanging in the air like fog. I wondered if she would really go through with it, or if she'd find some way to wriggle out, as she always had before. Every time the phone rang or I heard her footsteps in the hall, my heart jumped, half expecting her to back out. But Saturday came, and the old house filled with voices and laughter. The family reunion buzzed with the usual chaos. Kids running in the yard, aunts trading gossip, Dad manning the grill like it was a battlefield. I stayed on the edges, arms crossed, watching Sarah fidget at the table, eyes darting nervously between relatives. She looked pale, almost sick. Then, as dinner was winding down, she stood up, tapping her glass with a trembling hand. The sound rang out, sharp and clear, silencing the room. I watched her, arms folded, my back against the wall. I didn't let myself hope. I waited for her to disappoint me again. Sarah cleared her throat, voice wavering but loud enough to cut through the chatter. "I have something I need to say," she announced, and instantly all eyes turned to her. Conversations died away. The air felt electric, everyone sensing the edge in her tone. Mom looked up, confusion creasing her brow. Dad set down his fork, already frowning as if he sensed a storm coming. Sarah gripped the back of her chair like it was the only thing holding her upright. "For the past few years, everyone's believed I was the one helping Mom and Dad with their bills," she began. But that wasn't true. It was Julia. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on, forcing herself to keep going. "Julia was the one making the payments. I let you think it was me. I let you believe I was the hero while she did all the work. I lied. And I'm so sorry." Shock rippled through the room. Faces turned to me, disbelief and confusion written across them. Mom blinked, her mouth working silently, eyes glassy with tears. Dad was the first to recover. "Wait, what are you saying, Sarah?" His voice was tight, strained. "I'm saying Julia was the one sending the money all this time," Sarah repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I took credit for it. I let you believe I was helping when I wasn't. I was scared you'd be disappointed in me, so I lied. I'm sorry." The words seemed to hang in the air forever. Mom's face crumpled as she turned to me, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Julia," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "We didn't believe you. We called you a liar. I'm so sorry. How could we not see it? How did we not know?" Dad stood, crossing the room in a few long strides. There was guilt etched deep in his face, guilt and shame. "Julia, I don't even know what to say. We were wrong about everything. You didn't deserve any of this. I'm so sorry." Their apologies were real, overflowing with the kind of regret that comes from years of misunderstanding. But all I could do was nod, the words catching in my throat. I'd waited so long for them to see me, to see the truth. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, all I felt was exhaustion. relief edged with something like grief for all the years lost to lies. Sarah's confession had cracked something open in our family. The room buzzed with quiet conversations after, people glancing between Sarah and me, their faces troubled, sad, and, finally, understanding. Even then, I knew it would take time for old wounds to heal, for trust to grow back. But for the first time in years, I felt seen. The truth was finally out, and maybe, just maybe, that could be enough to start again. I'd waited years for those words, rehearsing the moment in my mind so many times that it had become almost a fantasy. My parents would finally see me, understand the pain I'd carried, and with a few honest words, the past would somehow loosen its grip. But when their apology finally came, it landed far softer than I expected. The sense of vindication I'd craved wasn't there. Instead, I felt hollow, as if all those years of waiting had been for something that could never truly fill the space inside me. In that moment, I understood something vital. I hadn't endured and fought and survived for their sake, not really. I'd done it for myself. The healing I needed would never come from them. My mom's face was blotched with tears, her hand trembling as she tried to reach for me. "Julia, we've been so blind. I don't know how we missed it. I don't know how we could have been so unfair to you." The remorse in her eyes was raw, as if she was only now beginning to realize the depth of the wound. My dad, always the quieter one, looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped and eyes rimmed with guilt. "We're sorry, Julia, truly," he said, voice thick. "You've done so much for us and we failed you. I don't know how to make it right, but I hope you'll let us try." For a moment, I just looked at them. All the years I'd spent swallowing my hurt so they wouldn't have to face the truth, so they could keep pretending things were fine, flashed before me. I finally saw how my silence had been a shield for them, but a cage for me. Letting them believe Sarah's stories, her manipulations, had cost me more than I could ever articulate. Trust, self-worth, peace. My parents weren't the only ones who'd been blind. "I appreciate your apology," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart hammered in my chest. "But this isn't something we can fix overnight. I need time, and I need space. Right now, I just have to focus on myself." The words felt strange, foreign, but liberating. For once, I was setting the boundaries I needed, not the ones that made others comfortable. Mom quickly wiped her tears, nodding almost frantically, her desperation obvious. "We understand, sweetheart. Just please don't shut us out. We want to do better." Her voice broke on the last word. I gave her a small, tired smile, more out of habit than anything else, and let my gaze drift to Sarah, who sat motionless, staring at her hands, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. There was nothing left to say to her. I slipped on my coat and walked out, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the hallway, each step lighter than the last. Outside, the air felt crisper, cleaner. For the first time, I wasn't weighed down by guilt or responsibility. I didn't look back. I didn't even think about Sarah, her lies, her manipulations, her endless ability to twist everything in her favor. Whatever fallout came next, it was between her and my parents. I was done shielding them from consequences, done carrying the burdens that were never really mine. Days passed. Sunday arrived, a day that once meant family brunches and awkward small talk, now just another reminder of everything that had changed. My phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with Sarah's name. I didn't need to open the message to know what she wanted. I could practically hear her voice, wheedling and false, but I read it anyway. "I told them the truth, Julia. Now can you send me the money we talked about?" A surge of anger threatened to choke me. How quickly she reverted to her old ways, as if honesty was a transaction, something she could barter for cash. But underneath the anger was something else. Pity. She was still trapped in her patterns, unable to see the damage she caused, the relationships she'd poisoned. I drew a slow breath, letting the emotions settle, and typed back, short and direct. "Meet me at Mom and Dad's. Let's talk there." I didn't elaborate. When Sarah arrived, I was already seated in the living room with our parents. The silence was thick, their faces drawn tight with disappointment and sorrow. Sarah stepped inside, her bravado faltering the moment she saw us all together. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice thin and uncertain. I held up my phone, showing them her message. I thought Mom and Dad should see this, I said, my tone calm but unyielding. So they'd know the only reason you finally told the truth was because you wanted money from me. The words hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. For the first time, I didn't flinch from the confrontation. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that my forgiveness wasn't a currency she could trade on. Mom flushed, her grief tinged with anger, while Dad just closed his eyes, rubbing his temples as if the weight of it all was finally too much. "I'm not giving you the money, Sarah," I said, my voice low but steady. "Telling the truth wasn't supposed to be a bargaining chip. It was something you owed us, a long time ago. I'm not rewarding you for doing the bare minimum, not after all the years of pain and damage." I stood, my bag already packed, ready to leave. Sarah's mask crumbled and she collapsed, sobbing at my feet, clutching at my arm with desperate hands. "Please, Julia," she cried, her voice ragged with fear and regret. "I'm begging you. I don't know what else to do." For years I would have given in. For years I would have tried to comfort her, to fix things, to make it all right. But not anymore. I gently pulled my arm free, looking down at her. Not with anger, but with the clear-eyed understanding that I couldn't save her from herself. "That's not my problem anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I walked out, her cries chasing me down the hallway. But this time I didn't let them in. I closed the door behind me and paused, waiting for the familiar ache of guilt to bloom in my chest. It never came. Instead, I felt lighter, as if I'd finally found the exit from a maze I'd spent my whole life trapped inside. No more anger, no more regret, just a quiet, powerful sense of freedom. I realized that healing wasn't about getting an apology or seeing justice done. It was about reclaiming my life, on my terms. I walked into the world, the weight of the past falling away with every step. I was done cleaning up the messes others made, done sacrificing my own happiness for people who couldn't or wouldn't change. For the first time, the future felt wide open, and I was ready to step into it alone, leaving Sarah and all the old hurts where they belonged, behind me.